Hello everyone. It's Sunday the 28th of June as I do my recording. I don't know when it is when you're watching, but welcome back to my study on a Sunday, which means that today I'll be looking at the passages set for today, or passages that are being used by the church in the Bible across the world or more locally as part of reflecting on a particular book. So this morning I want to spend some time in the book of Ruth, because for the month of June, many Methodist churches and other churches have been in what's called Bible Month, where we spend a month looking. In June we have Bible Month, and this year, sorry for the clattering around, this year it's the book of Ruth, which is quite handy because there are 4 chapters, so we've read a chapter a week, those churches that have been doing it. Today is the 4th week, so we should be reading Ruth chapter 4, but I'm recording this because on the back of Black Lives Matter and the back of so much protest about injustice in the world, I wanted to spend a little while with one of the ways of reading Ruth and read one of the chapters for you twice, so that you perhaps come at it with some fresh eyes, or it affirms something or challenges something that you've assumed about the book or about God or about the world we live in. So the story so far, I'm reading chapter 3, but the story so far, a woman called Naomi with her husband Elimelech have moved from Israel to the land of Moab. They took their sons with them. Both of their sons married Moabite women, and within a short period of time, Elimelech and both of Naomi's sons die, leaving the women essentially destitute. Ruth says to Naomi, Naomi says to Ruth, "You stay here and I'm going to go back to my people." But Ruth says to her, "I'm coming with you. We are family and I will travel back with you." They've heard that there is food in Israel where there isn't much where they are, and they travel back essentially homeless. There's a bit of a stir when they arrive back, and we're not sure what that's about. And then Ruth does what many poor people at that time did. She goes out during the harvest into the fields of a man called Boaz, and she follows along with others who are essentially scavenging behind the harvesters to pick up the bits of grain that they miss to take home, so that she and Ruth and Naomi have some food. We're not even sure whether they have a home in the way that the story is told. Boaz notices Ruth. Maybe she's beautiful, maybe she's hardworking. There are all kinds of gentle ways of thinking about this. But he notices her, and he asks who she belongs to, which is really interesting. And he says to the young man, "Leave her alone. Don't bother her," which again seems like an odd thing to have to tell people. He even says to one of the workers, when Ruth is walking along behind you, just drop a few extra bits of wheat so that she has a bit more. And she engages with him a little bit. She goes home and tells Naomi this, and Naomi hatches a plan for the two of them. And we pick it up in Ruth chapter 3. And I'm going to read the chapter as it is now in the New Revised Standard Version, and then I'm going to change a few of the words and see what difference it makes. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight on the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor, and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came quietly and uncovered his feet, and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. "Who are you?" he said. And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. So remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do so. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another. For he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it. And he measured out 6 measures of barley, and put it on her back, and then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." So I'm going to change 2 things when I read it again. I'm going to change the word feet into the word penis, because that is a commonly understood euphemism of the time. And I'm also going to change it where it says at midnight the man was startled. I'm going to say he woke shuddering. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you've been working. See, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his penis, and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came quietly and uncovered his penis and lay down. At midnight the man woke shuddering and turned over, and there, lying at his penis, was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. So remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do so. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then, as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his penis until morning, got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it. And he measured out 6 measures of barley, and put it on her back. And then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." So as I've said before, and I said it a little bit last week, I think, thinking about Ruth, many people want to look at the story and see it as a kind of beautiful romantic story of a gentle, kind man who reaches out to a foreigner, never mind the fact of a peasant, a poor woman, and shows her not just great kindness and generosity, but eventually takes her as his wife. And the story ends with us finding out that they have a son, and that their son is the father of Jesse, and that Jesse is the father of David, who is the great king of Israel. So some of it might be about lineage, some of it might be about this benevolence, this kindness in Boaz as an example to all who are wealthy. But the way I read it the second time changes the story considerably, because Naomi essentially says to Ruth, in order for you to have some kind of security, to have some kind of life into the future, I have a plan. And that plan is essentially for you to prostitute yourself in the direction of Boaz. To go and to wait until he's drunk, until he's fallen asleep, until everyone else is asleep. Go and make love to him. Go and compromise him so that he has no choice other than to somehow look after you, look after us. And so Ruth goes. And when Boaz is contented with wine and food and is lying comfortably in a corner, she goes and she uncovers his genitals and she sleeps with him. And if you change the words that I changed in the middle of the passage, where around midnight the man awoke startled, one of the other ways of translating, I understand, that verb or that description of what the man awoke shuddering. The man awoke in the midst of an orgasm and looked around and saw this young woman lying on his genitals, lying with him in the act of intercourse. And immediately he says to her, this is a wonderful thing you've done. Don't be afraid and don't worry about it, and we'll sort it all out. And in terms of responsibility, obviously Boaz, in that reading of the story, doesn't want this to become a scandal. Doesn't want this. Or is just massively, as part of it, massively proud of the fact that as an older man, this young woman has chosen to sleep with him. But he really does say to her, don't let anyone see that you were here. Don't tell anyone that you were here. Tomorrow I'm going to sort all this out. And if this other relative who is closer to you and Naomi won't look after you, don't worry, I will look after you. But I'll go and make sure that you're looked after either way. So stay with me. Stay with me until morning. But go before anyone else wakes up, because this mustn't be known. So of course, Ruth goes back to Naomi. Naomi says, how did it go? And Ruth says, he paid me. He paid me and he promised me. And Naomi says, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see how the matter ends. So how does that change our reading of the story? Well, it doesn't necessarily change the kindness of Boaz. It doesn't necessarily change the fact of his benevolence towards Ruth and Naomi, his desire to have them, to see them prosper and be safe. But it does say something about, in that reading of the story, about the lengths to which widows and other women who have no property, who have no purchase on society, who have nothing essentially, the lengths they must go to in order to secure their next meal, never mind some long-term security. And there are some scholars who say the book of Ruth is a powerful social commentary on the fact of a wealthy, complacent Israel who think themselves on top of the pile and everything's great. But who's at the bottom of the pile and is revealed to be incredibly vulnerable by the story? The foreigner and the widow. The very people who in the Old Testament law and in right through into the New Testament church in Acts, that built into the Jewish consciousness, built into the Jewish law, is this sense of responsibility for those who are vulnerable and small. And yet Israel seemed to have grown prosperous, have settled. Boaz represents all of that. In the beginning of the story, he's kind enough to say, look after that one, that Ruth, look after her a little bit more than the others, but he seems quite content in a system where those who are working for him and those who are following on behind in gathering up the bits and pieces that are left over is quite blind, it seems, to the fact of that system being corrupt and being lopsided, being unjust. And so Ruth prostitutes herself. Naomi, well, we can have her rubbing her hands in glee. We can place into Naomi a little bit of selfishness. We can see her using Ruth in some way, or we can see her living for the rest of her life with the fact that there was no choice other than to say to her beloved daughter-in-law, who had chosen to sacrifice her life at home to be with her as a foreigner, how about you take your clothes off and go and entrap Boaz How about you make yourself impure? How about you do something unholy in order for us to have a plate of food in front of ourselves, even just for the next few days? And we'll worry about the future when that comes. How about that? Why read that story today? Well, Ruth chapter 3 was last week's lesson, but it's a story that I've wanted to tell for a long time and wanted to use in the church for a long time. It would have come around in the lectionary towards the end of this year, and I would have preached it then in Haxby and Wigginton and at Central. But I wanted to share it today because one of the things that this coronavirus season has shown to us is how deeply unjust our world is. How deeply unjust it is. That there are literally millions and millions and millions of textile workers in India and Bangladesh and Pakistan and places like that. There are millions and millions and millions of people living hand to mouth around the world in conditions that are unsanitary and unaffirming and give them no fullness of life, so that you and I can buy cheap clothing. We trumpet the fact that a couple of weeks ago people could go back into Next and into Topshop and into Primark and we could go and buy clothes again. Thank God we could go and buy cheap clothes again. But where did the stories go? I didn't see them. I saw them in the beginning of the crisis that emerged in India, just for those who were migrant workers trying to get home. But where have the stories gone of those places in the world where people have had everything that they survive on cut off because we can't go to Primark? And so Primark and other companies like them can just cancel orders and say, you know what, we don't want the stuff you've even made already, because that's in the contract. We have so much power in the way we write these things up that we can just say, you know what, if we don't want it once you've made it, we'll just not have it. In the same way that our supermarkets, I don't know if they still do, but used to have policies in their contracts with farmers where they would say to a farmer, could you grow us 30 fields of cauliflower, but when the time comes, if we've got too much, we'll either pay you a vastly reduced rate that will cost you money, or we just won't take it at all and the contract will be void. Power is a dangerous thing. And Boaz has power, and what he represents has power, and Ruth and Naomi have none. And look what they have to do. Look what they have to do to make sure that they have food on their plates. I hope you hope, whoever you are, and whatever your politics are, whatever faith you have or don't, I hope that we together are committed to a kinder and fairer world. And I want to say this, a less prosperous world, because the way we go about sharing out what is the profits within a system that we have at the moment means that it's vastly unfair. And a small proportion of the world's population is mega rich. But for those of us who sit comfortably in houses right now, with food on our tables, clothes on our backs, for those of us who, and I don't want to make light of the fact of many things in our country being strained, including our health services, sometimes a matter of life and death for people. But I do want to say that we have been on the whole inconvenienced, and not a lot more. For most of us, we have been inconvenienced by coronavirus, and not a lot more. And yet for millions and millions of people in the world, and in our own country, they are, with Ruth and Naomi, asking how they might prostitute themselves in some way to put the next meal on the table. So maybe this is a love story with a happy ending that paves the way through Obed, Jesse, and into King David. Maybe that's part of what it is. But I want today to hold on to the reading of this passage, which sees it as a deeply subversive political and religious commentary on a prosperous and comfortable Israel. And that says, the widows and the orphans, look what you do to them. Look what you make them do in order for them to have a small sack of barley to take home, even though we're not sure there is a home for them to take it to. It really matters how we vote whenever we have an election again. It really matters how we spend our money. It really matters in which directions we look. It really matters that we maybe think the best deal isn't the cheapest deal. It really matters that we think about how our resources are spread more equally and fairly across the world. It really matters that for all of us maybe we pay more for the things that we choose to pay less for previously, because we know that that's more fair and more just. It really matters that we shop locally, that we support locally, without that becoming some kind of nationalistic, parochial kind of expression of loyalty and, to the exclusion of all that is happening outside. But maybe this passage, more than anything, is about asking us whether we will join in the narrowing of the gap between Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. How we can come alongside Ruth and Naomi in every way possible. How we can confront and encourage Boaz to be part of breaking the cycle of people prostituting themselves to survive. How can we do that? Well, there's a lot of work to do, and I hope that coming out of this, we're willing to do it and do it together. Maybe read the whole story again through that fresh lens and see what you make of it by the end. But I wanted to offer you that to you today, and to ask you how, as I've said just now, how you and I get to be part of being alongside those who have nothing or very little, and how we are part of challenging, encouraging, and welcoming when we see it happening. The change of heart, the change of system, the change of structure, the change of values that we can shape together when it comes to our glorifying of wealth and our lies sometimes about opportunity. Hope you have a great day. Bless you. Cheers.